What if your sadness isn't a weakness? What if the emptiness you feel isn't the end, but the beginning of something sacred? Most people who feel lost don't realize they're walking a sacred path. They think something is broken inside them, that they've failed somehow, that they've fallen too far to ever feel whole again. But Padre Pio, a man who lived through unbearable suffering, spiritual torment, and complete isolation, taught something different. He believed that before God awakens a soul, he allows it to break, not to destroy it, but to rebuild it from truth and what we often call depression. He saw as a sign that the soul is trying to return to God. If you've been feeling disconnected, numb, tired of everything and everyone, this might not be a crisis. It might be a calling. In this video, you're going to discover why the pain you've been carrying isn't just emotional, it's spiritual, and how Padre Pio's life reveals a powerful truth. The heaviest hearts often belong to the most awakened souls. Stay with me until the very end, because what you'll hear today might completely shift how you see your sadness, your silence, and your story. You'll learn the signs of a spiritual awakening, hidden in pain. You'll understand why you felt so alone, and why that loneliness may be proof that heaven is working within you. This message might just be the explanation your soul has been waiting for. Let's begin. Most people think depression is a flaw, a malfunction of the mind or body. But what if it's something more? What if it's not a disorder, but a signal from the soul? Padre Pio believed that there are moments in a person's life when God stops whispering, not because he is gone, but because he wants you to come closer. And in those moments, the soul begins to ache. It's not always visible. You might still smile, show up to work, talk to people, but something inside you feels missing, empty, disconnected. Padre Pio experienced this in a way few can imagine. Despite being a saint, he was tormented for years by feelings of abandonment. He wrote in his letters about an intolerable darkness, nights when God felt infinitely distant, when joy evaporated, and when every prayer fell back in silence. He once said, "The closer a soul gets to God, the more it feels the weight of its own nothingness." This is not the depression the world talks about. This is spiritual depression, a sacred void, a stripping away of the surface, so that something deeper can emerge. It's during this phase that many people believe they're falling apart. They cry without knowing why. They stop enjoying things they once loved. They feel like strangers in their own bodies, their own lives. But these symptoms, as painful as they are, may actually be birth pangs of awakening. You see, the soul cannot evolve while it's full of noise. So God, in his mysterious mercy, sometimes removes everything, distractions, comfort, even false identities, so that you can finally meet yourself and then meet him. Padre Pio taught that pain and silence are tools of transformation. They do not come to punish, but to purify. And when you feel like you're falling into darkness, you may actually be falling into truth. So if you've been carrying that invisible weight, the sadness no one sees, don't rush to escape it. Sit with it, breathe through it, ask what it's trying to reveal. Because within that pain, a deeper version of you is being born. One of the most overlooked and misunderstood signs of a spiritual awakening is this. You start to feel disconnected from everything you used to care about. It begins subtly. The music you once loved doesn't move you the same way. Your favorite places feel empty. People around you still laugh, still chase goals, but to you, it all seems meaningless. This is not apathy. This is not laziness. This is a soul pulling away from what no longer aligns. Padre Pio believed that when God wants to bring a soul closer, he often begins by removing the false attachments, the distractions, the noise, the illusions of fulfillment. You stop chasing what others chase. You no longer crave validation. The spotlight doesn't seduce you. You begin to crave silence, not out of sadness, but because your spirit is seeking depth. And that confuses people. They ask if something is wrong. They wonder why you've changed. They try to cheer you up, not realizing that what's happening inside of you isn't sadness, it's refinement. Padre Pio once wrote, "God removes what is not eternal, so that only what belongs to him may remain." This phase can feel incredibly lonely, not because you're truly alone, but because your soul is stepping into a new frequency and not everyone around you can hear it. You might begin to feel like you're not in the world anymore, even though you're still here. That's because in many ways you aren't. A spiritual awakening is not a beautiful light show. It's not always peaceful. Often, it begins with losing your appetite for everything you thought you needed. And in that emptiness, God begins to plant something new, a deeper purpose, a truer version of you. But this process requires space. So don't be surprised if you start craving solitude, if you feel the urge to walk away from noise, from distractions, from surface-level relationships. That's not weakness. That's alignment. Padre Pio understood this intimately. He often withdrew from others, not because he didn't care, but because he knew that some parts of your calling are too sacred to be exposed before they're fully formed. If you're in this phase right now, where everything feels foreign and nothing feels exciting anymore, take heart. Your soul isn't shutting down, it's waking up. And the disconnect you feel, it's not failure. It's the first signal that you're finally beginning to hear heaven's frequency. Before God uses a soul, he wounds it. Padre Pio. There's a pain that doesn't show up in scans. It doesn't bleed. It doesn't scream. But it lives inside your chest like a weight, one that no one else seems to understand. This is the pain of preparation, and it often arrives just before your life changes forever. Padre Pio believed that the deepest transformations don't happen through comfort. They happen in isolation, in tears, in the unbearable silence between prayers. You begin to question everything. You wonder why you're not happy, why you feel so distant from others, why it seems like God has gone quiet when you need him most. But this pain, the spiritual ache, isn't a punishment. It's a process. You're not being abandoned. You're being broken open so that the false layers can fall away and the real soul can breathe. This is why many spiritual awakenings look like breakdowns, because they are breakdowns. The breakdown of ego, of false identity, of everything that was never really you. Padre Pio himself faced extreme inner torment. He was misunderstood, criticized, even silenced by the very church he served. For years, he bore the stigmata, bleeding wounds in his hands and feet, not just physically but spiritually. He once wrote in a letter, "I feel abandoned, crushed, yet I still say, Fiat Lord, let be done to me." That is the heart of awakening. You don't need to understand the pain. You need to surrender to its lesson. Because pain, when held in the hands of God, becomes a tool. It softens you, strips away pride. It humbles the soul until only what is sacred remains. This phase often includes anxiety without explanation, emotional exhaustion, loss of interest in the world, guilt over not being enough spiritually, a desire to disappear, and yet a flicker of hope that keeps you breathing. That flicker is God. He hasn't left you. He's allowing the fire, so the gold inside you can rise. You are not weak for struggling. You are not broken for feeling lost. You are being prepared. So when it feels like you're drowning, remember, even that water has purpose. Even that weight has meaning. And in the words of Padre Pio, the more you suffer, the more you are loved by God. Sometimes the most sacred awakenings begin with a collapse, not a gradual shift, but a sudden falling apart of everything you thought was stable. You lose a relationship. You lose your career. You lose your sense of direction. And worst of all, you lose the version of you that you thought was real. At first, it feels like punishment. But what if it's purification? Padre Pio taught that when God wants to remake a soul, he often removes all that is unnecessary, even if that means stripping away what you thought you needed to survive. This isn't cruelty. It's clarity, because sometimes you must lose the world to finally find your soul. Many of the most powerful spiritual transformations begin not in light, but in ashes. There's a moment when the old life simply stops working. The friends who once felt close now seem distant. The dreams you once chased no longer excite you. The goals you worked so hard for feel meaningless. You don't recognize your reflection anymore, and that's because it's changing. Padre Pio experienced this, too. There were years when he was isolated, censored, and forbidden to speak publicly. Even the church, which he loved and served, questioned his gifts to the world. It looked like he was being silenced, but in reality he was being refined, because it was during those years of silence that Padre Pio wrote his most powerful letters, prayed his deepest prayers, and formed a level of intimacy with God that no public platform could have created. He once wrote, "Let us never forget, in the deepest valleys, God whispers the loudest." So if you're standing in the ruins of your old life, confused, broken, and unsure where to go next, you may be exactly where you're supposed to be. This collapse is not a detour. It's an altar. It's where you stop performing and start listening. It's where God removes the noise so you can finally hear his voice. Because it's in the emptiness that he begins to fill you with truth. So instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is this making possible within me?" You may find that what looked like an ending was actually a sacred beginning. And you didn't lose everything. You lost what was never truly yours. Padre Pio was not just a man of miracles. He was a man of mystery. His life was filled with divine manifestations, stigmata, bilocation, prophetic visions. But what truly made him different was how he understood the hidden pain of others. He believed that some of the most spiritually advanced souls were the ones who felt the most lost. Those who suffer most are those closest to Christ, he once wrote, because he does not trust such suffering to just anyone. Pio didn't look for holiness in appearances or in grand acts of devotion. He looked for it in the eyes of those who wept in silence, in the voices that trembled during confession, in the people who questioned their faith but never stopped seeking. He said that the greatest battles of the soul are not visible to the world, but heaven sees them clearly. Many who came to him expected comfort. What they received was truth. He would gently tell them that their restlessness wasn't a curse. It was a sign that God was drawing them in, that the darkness they were facing was a shadow cast by a light that was about to break through. Padre Pio also believed that those chosen for spiritual awakening often faced intense inner trials, not because they were weak, but because their soul was being stretched to hold more light. He once told a woman who was battling despair, "You are not far from God. You are closer than ever, and that is why it hurts." That statement echoes a profound truth. The deeper your calling, the more intense your purification. Padre Pio saw depression, anxiety, confusion, not always as disorders, but as signs that the soul was being reshaped, that something sacred was happening in secret. And perhaps the most powerful part, he never saw these people as broken. He saw them as becoming. Padre Pio was not just a man of miracles. He was a man of mystery. His life was filled with divine manifestations, stigmata, bilocation, prophetic visions. But what truly made him different was how he understood the hidden pain of others. He believed that some of the most spiritually advanced souls were the ones who felt the most lost. Those who suffer most are those closest to Christ, he once wrote, because he does not trust such suffering to just anyone. Pio didn't look for holiness in appearances or in grand acts of devotion. He looked for it in the eyes of those who wept in silence, in the voices that trembled during confession, in the people who questioned their faith but never stopped seeking. He said that the greatest battles of the soul are not visible to the world, but heaven sees them clearly. Many who came to him expected comfort. What they received was truth. He would gently tell them that their restlessness wasn't a curse. It was a sign that God was drawing them in, that the darkness they were facing was a shadow cast by a light that was about to break through. Padre Pio also believed that those chosen for spiritual awakening often face intense inner trials, not because they were weak, but because their soul was being stretched to hold more light. He once told a woman who was battling despair, "You are not far from God. You are closer than ever, and that is why it hurts." That statement echoes a profound truth. The deeper your calling, the more intense your purification. Padre Pio saw depression, anxiety, confusion, not always as disorders, but as signs that the soul was being reshaped, that something sacred was happening in secret. And perhaps the most powerful part, he never saw these people as broken. He saw them as becoming. If you're watching this and wondering, how do I know if I'm awakening or just falling apart? Here's the truth. Spiritual awakenings don't always come with angelic music or moments of clarity. They often arrive disguised as confusion, grief, and silence. Here are the signs that your soul is awakening, even if everything feels uncertain. 1. You feel disconnected from the world. What once mattered now feels hollow. Parties, gossip, chasing money. They no longer feed your spirit. You crave something deeper, even if you don't know what it is yet. That's not apathy. That's alignment. 2. Your emotions have intensified. You cry more easily. You feel everything more deeply, both pain and beauty. This sensitivity isn't weakness. It's your soul tuning into divine frequencies. Padre Pio used to say, "The soul hears what the ears cannot." 3. You feel alone, even around others. It's not that you become distant. It's that your spirit is outgrowing shallow connections. You long for truth, for meaning, for silence. Solitude becomes a sanctuary, not a punishment. 4. You're letting go of who you thought you were. Old labels stop fitting you. You begin questioning everything. Your career, your beliefs, your path. This isn't a breakdown. It's a sacred redefinition. 5. You're drawn to spirituality without knowing why. Maybe you've started praying again. Maybe you're suddenly curious about saints, signs, or scripture. This pull is real. It's your soul remembering what it forgot. 6. You feel a sense of purpose, but don't know where it leads. There's a quiet fire inside you. You know you were made for something more, even if you can't explain it yet. That's not delusion. That's destiny. If you've recognized even just one of these signs, you're not imagining things. You're not broken. You're waking up. And as Padre Pio often reminded his followers, the soul that suffers and still believes is already touching heaven. So don't fear the change you feel. It's not the end. It's the beginning of who you truly are. Maybe you've carried this heaviness for years. The emptiness, the questions, the tears and silence. And no one ever told you that what you were feeling wasn't weakness. It was awakening. You weren't falling apart. You were being peeled open, layer by layer, so your soul could breathe again. What the world calls depression, Padre Pio saw as sacred preparation, a divine unraveling, a holy fire. And if you've recognized yourself in this video, then know this: you are not alone, not strange, not lost. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. You are a soul in transition, moving from the life that numbed you to the truth that will finally set you free. So pause, take a breath, look at how far you've come, not in achievements, but in survival. The battles you fought alone, the nights you kept praying even when you couldn't feel anything. Those were the sacred proofs of your awakening. Padre Pio said, "The soul that weeps in silence is already praying." And if you are weeping now, you are praying now, even without words. So here's what I ask of you. If this message reached your soul, share your experience in the comments, even just a few words, because someone else, somewhere, might be carrying the same invisible weight, and your voice might be the light they've been waiting for. Subscribe if you want to keep walking this path with others who are also awakening. Here, we honor the sacred pain and the sacred transformation it brings. You were never broken. You were simply being reborn. Awakening is not a finish line. It's an invitation. And now that you've seen the signs, what should you do? The first step is simple, but powerful. Stop running from the silence. Let yourself sit in the stillness. Turn off the noise. Make space for something greater to reach you. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to have all the answers. The soul doesn't awaken through control. It awakens through surrender. Padre Pio would often tell people who felt spiritually lost, be patient. The Lord is working in your soul, even if you cannot see it. So be patient. Let your questions live inside you without fear. Let your sadness teach you without shame. Here's what you can do now. Set time every day to be alone with God, not to speak, but to listen. Keep a journal of your thoughts, dreams, and feelings, not to analyze, but to notice. Surround yourself with things that bring peace. Nature, prayer, music that touches the soul. Release the pressure to be understood by others. Your path is sacred, not public. And most of all, trust the transformation. Your confusion has purpose. Your ache is holy. Your detachment from the world is not failure. It's heaven calling you inward. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to meet yourself, because the you that's emerging was never broken, only buried. Padre Pio believed that the most powerful miracles were not physical. They were the quiet shifts in the soul, the moments when pain turned into peace and fear gave way to faith. That moment is now. You've been awakened. And now, your only task is to begin walking slowly, honestly, and with your heart open to God.